Welcome to the Co-Movement Gym podcast. This week we are talking with Tommy Wheatley and Luke Kidwell. Tommy and Luke are the founders of Raw Milk and Deadlifts. The company's tagline describes them perfectly. Just two farm boys spreading the message of traditional farming, old school lifting, and getting back to nature. Their story, message, and zest for life made for one great conversation. I hope you enjoy. The Co-Movement Gym podcast is sponsored by Native Path Supplements, Lombardi Chiropractic, and A Dog's Day Out Doggy Daycare. Mention this podcast or use the promo code in the episode description for a nice discount on us. All right, we're back. Tommy and Luke from Raw Milk and Deadlifts. How you doing, guys?
We're doing good. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate it, man.
Yeah, dude. So second time on the podcast. I have a lot of stuff I want to dive into today. You guys are doing really cool things on Instagram, which sparked a conversation again. So here we are. I want to get into dairy products. So stores sell pasteurized dairy products. The government adopted the pasteurization process in, I think, the 70s. And I'm really interested to see what you guys think about, like, how does it affect the food itself, pasteurization? Because I know most people think that raw milk and raw dairy makes them sick and it's bad bacteria. So can you guys just explain for the listeners that don't know what the pasteurization process is and how it affects the food?
Yes. So first and foremost, what it is. The standard pasteurization process is 161 degrees for really only about 15 seconds. So it's not that long. But what happens in that short amount of time is pretty dramatic, especially when you're talking about dairy products. So just for starters, let's look at raw dairy that's unpasteurized and what it has in it. It's full of enzymes, all kinds of enzymes, each one with its own function. So you have enzymes that help you digest sugar. You have the enzymes that help you digest the fat in the milk. There's enzymes to digest and utilize the protein to absorb calcium. There's even enzymes, and we could talk a little bit more about this later, but there's enzymes that help fight off potentially harmful pathogens in the milk. So there's protective enzymes that actually keep it safe. There's tons of vitamins, enough to where you could probably replace all or most of your supplements with them. Vitamin D, vitamin A, E, K, your B vitamins, and there's healthy bacteria, all these things. Well, within those 15 seconds of pasteurization, and sometimes they do more because now there's ultra pasteurized and things, you kill all the enzymes, all the supportive digestive enzymes that are in the milk. 100% of them die. That's one of the goals of it, is because they don't want any living kind of function going on there. And then even the vitamins are not usually are not completely inactive, but are heavily damaged, and there's a sliding scale. I think we actually have a post about it somewhere on Instagram, but you'll see charts that kind of say, like, vitamin A is damaged usually this much in pasteurization, like percentage-wise, they're all damaged. That also goes for other nutrients like iron, zinc, magnesium that are in raw dairy, heavily damaged. And yes, so you take this food that was once living, that was once extremely healthy, and not only does it have all these nutrients, but like they're bioavailable, right? Because of the enzymes, it's easy for your body to use. And you damage or destroy all of them, and you're left with pus, I guess you could call it, but nothing even close to what it originally was.
So how did the pasteurization process even come about? Like, where did it come from? I know it's Louis Pasteur. I think it was in like the late 1800s. He started playing around with this, but it didn't get really popular until, from what I read, the 70s. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, what brought this about? Because for hundreds of years we've drank raw dairy with successfully, and like the human species didn't die. So where did things turn?
Yes, the late 1800s when it really started. And, there's a really good book. I think it's called just The History of Milk. And it goes over in much more detail than we can go into now. But essentially, Industrial Revolution, late 1800s, people are flooding from the farms to the cities. And, back then, the cities were disgusting. There was horse poop all over the place because cars weren't invented yet. People stacked on top of one another. And it was just lots of dirty environments. And one of the big things was whiskey distilleries were in all these cities because there's a bunch of factory workers drinking whiskey, and that the spent grain was what they were using to feed the cows in these cities. And there's a name for this. I think it's just called distillery dairies, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken. And they were just known for being just like the milk that came from those filthy environments being fed filthy food. The milk was bad. So like you can kind of understand they're like, hey, there's all this milk we need to make it safe for consumption. So pasteurization actually in that case, you're probably better off just not drinking milk, instead of straight pasteurized stuff. But to your point, like going up to 70, it wasn't raw milk was still very much a thing 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s. It wasn't uncommon for people to have the family dairy cow. The pasteurized stuff in the store was there, but also tons of people were still drinking their own dairy cow's raw milk, But it really wasn't until, say, the 70s, 80s, 90s that like the raw milk thing kind of disappeared for a while. It just seems maybe in the past 20, 30 years, maybe that it's really starting to make a comeback because people are seeing the effects of only consuming that pasteurized dairy.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Luke said, yeah, the milk that was coming out of those distillery dairies, if you read accounts of how they describe it, it was described as being almost clear and bluish, and you couldn't make cheese out of it, you couldn't make butter out of it. So the dairies and the hygiene in the dairies were so bad, the product was almost unrecognizable, compared to what we think of as milk. And yeah, they started doing that even really where that became such a trend was actually right after the War of 1812 because the U.S. banned importing whiskey from England. So that's when we started making it ourselves because we need our whiskey, our American. And that's when all these huge distilleries popped up. And that's when, yeah, the distillery dairies, or you'll hear them called slop dairies sometimes because they were fed that slop grain, came about. And it's funny too because a lot of people don't realize Pasteur actually did not originally invent pasteurization for milk. He did it so wine could stay on the shelves longer.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and I would have to check the date exactly, but that was around like 1860s, 70s, 80s, like that time frame. And it wasn't until close to a decade later they actually started applying it to milk for this distillery dairy problem. And it was funny, there was two trains of thought of how to solve it. There was two main camps. One was let's quit getting milk from these dairies. Let's source it from clean cows because we know how healthy it can be. Let's source it from clean cows, clean farms outside of the cities, and let's try to feed people that way. That was doctors, pediatricians who wanted to do that. And the other camp was, well, this is essentially a great business model. So let's keep this. But how do we keep people from dying when they drink it? Okay, let's pasteurization in Europe, they're doing this. Let's do it to the milk. And I think by that time, Louis Pasteur had done some testing with dairy, so they had a pretty good idea it would work. And it's funny that one of the main backers of that method was, I believe it was the co-founder of Macy's, one of the huge department stores. So a businessman is what I'm getting at. It was more business minded compared to the doctors at that time who were trying to kind of help more people were, pushing for the raw milk. So it was such a, you can understand why they did it because people were getting sick from drinking this awful stuff, but they definitely were like, well, we don't want to completely do away with this convenient business model. And that's what kicked off starting it. And then, yeah, it morphed into what it is today.
Yeah, it's like you can
Wow.
have your tinfoil hat on for some of it, but not all of it. Like originally, they probably had good intentions, but then the
Yes.
tinfoil hat comes on when you can see these businessmen were like, oh, hey, wait. Instead of having the farmer just sell raw milk directly to the consumer, now we've got this middleman process where we buy the milk for pennies on the dollar. do all this processing in a facility that costs lots of money that a farmer can't afford, and then we sell that milk to the consumer. Because so the tinfoil hat comes on when the middleman comes into play.
Yeah, for sure. All three of us agree with that. It's interesting that I had no idea the history of how that pasteurization process became popular with the dirty facilities and whatnot, and that makes sense, you know. But yeah, once you get government and policy regulations, all that involved, you know, it's hard to turn that around, but we are doing it. You know, I drink raw milk every single week. So it's interesting, like the number of people now that are lactose intolerant. I wonder, I don't know the answer to this. Maybe you guys do. Like, does that have something to do with them drinking pasteurized milk stripped of really all of its nutrients? Like, is that making lactose intolerant more prevalent in today's society?
Yeah, I think Tommy and I both agree here where it's lactose intolerance is almost, it's like not the person's fault, it's the milk's fault.
Yeah.
Because there's
Yeah.
lactose is an enzyme that's in milk that people say they can't digest. Well, that's because the pasteurization process destroys lactase, which is an enzyme that's supposed to be paired with lactose in order to digest it. And we have, so many people either comment or message us with their stories and of saying, "Oh, I thought I was lactose intolerant." That's how what Tommy and I thought. We were dairy free for about 4 years because we were like, "Oh, we just, dairy's bad for you." There's an extreme example of a guy we met at one of these homesteading conventions we went to, where this guy was like, he wasn't into health or anything. I think his wife dragged him to the show, and he said, "Yeah, sure, I'll go ahead. I'll tag along to this homesteading event." And he was like, "I love milk." He's like, "But when I drink it, he's like, I go to the bathroom, I throw up, I do all this stuff." He said, "But I love milk so much, one day a month, I'll set aside everything to do that day. The night before, I pound milkshakes, big old glass of milk and cookies. He just loves milk. But then he would be out for a day, and this was pasteurized milk. And then a buddy we were with at the event was like, "Here, take this quart of raw milk for free. Drink it tonight, see how you feel." The guy came back the next day and was like, "I got to find some raw milk, man. I didn't have any problems. I felt so good the next morning." He's like, "Usually I'd be out for 24 hours." And that's just one example of many of people who, and I don't want to say they think they're lactose intolerant. It's like they are because the enzyme to digest that is missing from your milk. So it's not even, that person's fault.
Yeah, the important point there for listeners is like the food is how the food is made up is altered. Like it's literally a different food after the pasteurization process, and hence all these issues. And so I was researching on Weston A. Price's website how like acne, people drinking skim milk a lot of times will get increased acne when they stop drinking skim milk. Their acne will go away. A lot of it is because skim milk depletes the body of vitamin A, and the pasteurization process causes an immune response in the body. So now we're thinking like autoimmune issues. I've read a lot of articles on like raw milk, helps or cures autoimmune issues in many cases. So have you guys heard similar things here, what I'm describing?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you mentioned that about the acne because that was one of the problems we each had with store-bought milk was it would cause our skin to break out. And when we
Yeah.
cut out dairy altogether, it kind of helped clear it up. Not because dairy is bad, but because we cut out the bad part of it. But yeah, when we reintroduced raw milk, no flare ups, no inflammation, no skin issues. And actually, very shortly after we got our own dairy cows and were milking them, we ran into an issue that a lot of homesteaders do, which is we have way too much milk. We got to get rid of some of it. So we were giving it, I say giving it to friends, in the community. And one of the guys who was not a health nut at all, this was about the only healthy thing he probably did in his life was drink the raw milk from our cows just because it tasted good.
He's just a classic good old boy.
Just a good old boy, chain smoke cigarettes, all the good stuff. But he said that he had psoriasis really bad for years. And within like the first couple weeks of him drinking the milk from our cows, he's like, man, I don't know what happened, but my psoriasis is gone, all this stuff. So there, and I mean, he was just saying it in passing. And he even, with as little as, he kind of knows about food, he contributed it to the milk. Like he was very clear. He's like, this is the only different thing I've done. It has to be the milk. It cured my psoriasis. And so yeah, there's a lot of, we've heard a lot of studies and things about how it's good for the skin. I think the whey protein is supposed to be good for the skin. And then also, if you look at it, especially compared to skim milk, those healthy fats, how good and nourishing those are for the skin. That of course you're completely losing in skim milk. And even if you have it in whole milk, it's going to be very hard for you to really absorb if it's pasteurized, because you lose the enzymes to use fat, to help you digest and use the fat. And then also, this is kind of a whole nother topic, is the homogenization, which breaks up the fats, which alters the way that those function and the way your body can use them. So long story to your question, yeah, we've definitely heard that skin issues and immune issues are heavily affected by raw dairy.
And to add on to what Tommy's talking about, me and him kind of got into fitness at the same time, 14, 15 years old. And we were just like, lift weights and then just eat all the food you can. That was the extent of our diet knowledge. And then when we were about 17 to 18, Tommy was the first person to say, hey man, like I quit dairy and my acne went away. And I had really bad acne. And I had been going to a dermatologist for years, was on several pills, several creams, very close to doing Accutane, and nothing was working. The acne was still very prevalent. And just me cutting out that pasteurized dairy, because my 17-year-old, dumb buddy said, hey, I cut that out. That worked. And that's really kind of one of the things, like, opened that whole door into health, where you're like, how does he know what's going to cure acne more than the doctor?
Yeah, looking back at, this is so funny you guys bring this up. I didn't even have any idea you guys had that issue when I looked that statistic up. But same thing in college and like after college for me. I had a lot of acne like on my back, and I had attributed it to like working out and just being active and sweaty. But it's so funny. I'm just correlating this now. About 24 or 25 years old, I stopped drinking milk altogether because I was just confused with what was healthy and whatnot. And my acne went away. And then I would say 12, 13 years ago, I started drinking just raw milk from goat and cow, and I haven't had acne since then. So it's interesting. One of my buddies actually cured his asthma. He stopped drinking conventional dairy products and went raw only. And he had asthma his whole childhood, right through his 20s, and in his 30s, his asthma went away. I don't know. Maybe it's not correlated, but we know that there's immune responses, right, with that pasteurization process.
Yeah.
So maybe, have you heard anything about asthma improving?
Yeah, I think there was a 7-year study done in Europe with children who had asthma. And I think Weston A. Price has it on their website. I'm pretty sure that's where I read it. But there was a 7-year study where they tracked that in kids who had sensitivities with asthma and didn't. And a huge theme they found was children who were raised on raw dairy rarely had it. And in some cases, they might have used it to reverse it. I can't remember. But yeah, the whole study was done on it compared to almost all the kids who had bad asthma were either drinking pasteurized dairy or maybe not dairy at all. But yeah, definitely supposed to be a huge correlation with that.
Wow. I'm hoping this is setting in for people listening. Even if you don't want to drink raw dairy, maybe no dairy and issues will clear up. And then if you get brave enough or find a really good clean source, you can start drinking raw dairy. Statistics wise, there is almost no statistics showing a vast number of people getting sick from drinking raw milk, but yet it's illegal. I just checked this yesterday. It's illegal in 25 states. So what's up with that? Like you can, we've seen cases here where like people get arrested, their farms are shut down. It's like a big deal. why so severe of a punishment if there is really no statistics proving that raw milk creates sickness?
Yeah, I think no matter what side of the political aisle you're on, I think most people would agree that people who make a lot of money can certainly influence laws, right? And it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier with that middleman, where I mean, dairy is still, even with all the nut milks and the vegan and vegetarian diets and all that being popular, milk is still an insanely popular food product in America, or dairy uh, products in general. And so if, all these farmers were able to start selling directly to the consumer, because raw milk
Okay.
by its nature, it's darn near impossible to sell it on a really large scale. It's hard to milk a cow in California and keep it raw and send it to Illinois,
Sure.
West Virginia, New York, wherever you're at. So I think there is a lot of money being made by large food processors. The processors, the ones make processors and distributors, are the one that's making all the money. It's not like all these farmers are riding around in Lamborghini tractors or anything. So that I feel like that's not that controversial of a take to say that there's people who are making a lot of money who want to keep making that money. Um, and the safety thing is funny. Weston A. Price, they post about it all the time and have all sorts of statistics on it where it's like there's no recorded deaths from raw dairy in.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know if it's ever. Or maybe there was one obscure one back with the slop dairies, a long time ago. But how many you hear often of E. coli outbreaks from a Chipotle lettuce or
Yeah.
something, but people don't stop eating lettuce. Lettuce isn't illegal. They just kind of go, "Oh wow, crazy," and then the food processor goes, "Yeah, we're doing an investigation. Oh, we did everything we are supposed to do," and no one really hears about it again. But raw milk just has that stigma behind it.
Yeah, so it has nothing to do with the dangerous part of drinking raw milk. It's a business, middleman profit piece at this point. That resonates with me, yeah, because I really thought they were still sort of pushing the whole dangerous statistic thing, but it's a business thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's very interesting. You guys just mentioned soy and almond milk, or milk alternatives. Like, what's your opinion on those?
So, I mean, well, first and foremost, we'll admit that at one point in time we consumed them. So if people want to turn the episode off now, we completely understand. We cannot be trusted. But so when we first got off of dairy back in high school, we did what most people do, which is the almond milks and those alternatives. Um, I mean, I guess first and foremost, our opinion is any like intentional food decision someone is making is it's a movement in the right direction compared to completely not caring, right?
Mhm.
So that's great, and we also can really sympathize and understand why people would, because there's a lot of people who have had terrible experiences with dairy and
Yeah.
are I mean, it's hard to convince someone who for their whole life, every time they've had dairy, they're in extreme pain or have terrible bowel movements.
Mhm.
We understand it's
Mhm.
hard to convince them, like, hey, you should drink milk. So
Mhm.
we understand why they got popular. um, do we think they're healthy? Absolutely not. Even if we were for some reason to go dairy free again, at this point, I think we would just like quit trying to replace it. Like just forget all the
Yeah.
dairy stuff and not make some frankenfood, because there's a few areas where you have to look at it. One, let's look at it from a health perspective first and foremost. Um, Almost all of them are have like anti-thickening agents in them, like xanthan gum, like guar gum, like all these weird, very funky ingredients in them. Um, Also, in addition to that, it's so obvious how they have to synthetically add things back in to even attempt at replicating like true dairy, true raw dairy. Like some almond milks will add in vitamins and things like this, but it's synthetic. It is, put in artificially. It's not going to be anywhere near the same as a food that comes perfectly woven together. Another big reason,
Bioavailable, right?
yeah, all the bioavailability. Another big reason also is environmental. A lot of people say, well, I don't do animal products because it's environmentally harmful. Um, Even if you just take almond milk, for example, people
Yep.
who know the industry, especially you talk to like big people out west who've seen those almond farms and things like that, those do a number on the environment. The amount of water and everything that
Yes.
has to be used for those, not to mention all the animals and things you have to kill in the ground and bugs you have to kill to be able to, maintain your harvest. They are extremely taxing on the environment. A lot of people out west in California and things like that, you hear them, they talk about how they hate the almond growing industry because they have to like
Mhm.
steal water from other places to use it, and it's not nearly as sustainable as a sustainable dairy operation. So, um, you know, that's just kind of an overall, I guess, our take on it is we can sympathize why someone would if they didn't know any better, but we don't believe they're healthy for you or for the environment. And if you're
Mhm.
dead set on wanting nothing to do with milk, you're probably better off like having nothing to do with milk or the nasty nut juice that they're
Yeah.
selling you.
I'd say the best thing about, say, an almond or soy milk is that it's often a gateway to raw milk.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where the benefit kind of stops right there. And I think
Yeah.
to touch on what Tommy said about the, just the environmental aspect of the farming of these things, I can't remember the statistic exactly. I think it's something along the lines of like, for each carton of almond milk, it's like
Hmm.
60 gallons of water goes into just making that one carton of almond milk. And these farms are hundreds, if not thousands, of acres of almonds.
Yeah.
And out west where they're hurting for water for it just to be put into almond milk is crazy when it could go into pastures that grow grass that have root systems that build the soil that absorb carbon. That whole rabbit
Yeah.
hole. But yeah, environmentally they are very tough to farm
And
those
Yeah.
products.
and then just
Yeah.
because I don't want to forget this point also, and I might have Luke tell it because I think he knows the story better. But just on the topic of, oh, well, it can't something be as healthy if we just add all the nutrients back in. The like our bodies know that you cannot truly replicate something that's natural. And I know Luke was telling me he saw a video of Will Harris, who's the guy, White Oak Pastures gentleman, very very popular
Yeah.
now,
I
talking
interviewed
about
him on our podcast. He
what's
was on our
that?
podcast. He was on our podcast.
Oh,
Oh,
cool.
that's
We just
cool.
missed him. Dang.
Yeah.
Oh, so he would be the one to tell the story, but how they had fish in salt water, and the fish lived and were fine and everything, and then they took them out. And you describe it, Luke, because you listened to it, but how they kind of
Yeah, it's he mentions it in his book. Um, he's down in Georgia, his University of Georgia. They had fish in a tank of salt water, big tank of salt water. Took the fish out, and then what they did was just take apart everything, all the components that made up that salt water, separated them, and then put them back together. That's all they did. They didn't add anything new. They didn't take anything out. They didn't do to them. Just separated all the components, put them back together, and put the fish back in. All the fish died. It was unlivable for the fish. And all they did was take it apart and put it back together. So what happens to all these food products? Obviously, we'll just focus on milk. When you're taking things out, putting things in, synthetic stuff, taking the real stuff, killing everything, nuking it with pasteurization, then adding all this stuff back in. Our bodies are not designed to even like recognize that may even be milk. And like the bioavailability, if someone doesn't understand what that term is, that's just your body's ability to absorb those nutrients. And
Yes.
it's a lot of cheap supplements from like say GNC or that you get from Whole Foods. Even you spend all this money on these supplements, and if your body's
Yes.
not absorbing them, you're just
Yes.
throwing them out of your body when you go to the bathroom, and it's never absorbed. So you're paying all this money for what you think is zinc, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K. Your body's not even absorbing it. So like if you're gonna, that's kind of one of the arguments I give for when people complain about the price of raw milk. People won't hesitate to spend $60 on fish oil pills when they're probably not probably not even absorbing those nutrients. So it's
Yeah.
like, man, if you can just go buy a couple of gallons of raw milk for that same price, where it's perfectly designed by God for you to absorb those nutrients, man, it kind of seems like a no-brainer for me. And the other argument I give is like, you buy a couple dairy cows and you start doing the milking, you understand why the farmer has to charge what he's got to charge.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a ton of work. Yeah, that's interesting. When you denature a food, you break it apart and then you put it back together, the bioavailability of what our body can absorb after that process is minimal at best. That's a fascinating fish story there, Luke. That's very, very interesting. And I've read the same thing too with supplements. People are spending $200, $300, $400 a month on shitty supplements, and they're not even absorbing the vast majority of it. Like, I've read articles about like probiotics. Probiotics are wicked expensive and they're pushed on everyone. And most of them contain no live bacteria. So you might as well just be eating a gelatin capsule when you could be drinking raw dairy or fermented foods, right? And be getting your healthy bacteria that way. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Can you speak to, I think we talked down at Polyface Farms a few years ago at Joel Salatin's event about, was it you guys that left or drank raw dairy past 7 days, 10 days? Like, you wanted to sort of prove a point that it just doesn't go bad overnight and make you sick. Was that you guys that did that?
I don't think that. I mean, we have done that. We have certainly,
Yes.
drank some milk that when you smell it, it's a very milky milk is the best way to describe it. But yeah, so it doesn't putrefy. It sours. Is that the right?
Yep.
Or is it the other way
It,
around?
it doesn't spoil. Yeah, it's sour. So
It doesn't spoil. It just sours. So all it's doing, because it's a living food, if it's 10, 14 days old, when it's fermenting, so it's not going to get you sick. It might be a shock to your system, taking in all that living good bacteria. It might be a shock to your system. You're like, oh, what's this? But it's not like a dangerous going to kill you. Even there's a lot of like cottage cheese, I believe it's just milk. Most people, the way they make cottage cheese, set it on a windowsill so it's not like outside. Set it on a windowsill where it can get sunshine, and it just kind of naturally curdles, and that's cottage cheese. That's what people are eating in the store, and a lot of recipes, like baking recipes, call for using sour milk.
And it's interesting too, because especially with raw milk, people are so scared of it spoiling fast or how fast it'll spoil. There's been a lot of times where I have traveled with raw milk, sometimes without a cooler even, or I've like left it room temperature, never been refrigerated, because I do some work at a farm that's like an hour away from where I live sometimes, and they have cows. So sometimes they'll be like, hey, take milk, or if I milk the cows, hey, take it. So there's been times where for hours I will milk the cow. It's in a jar, and then it's in my truck, not like baking in the sun, but it's in my truck, not refrigerated for hours. Completely fine. I'm not saying people should, I guess I'm not recommending it, but completely fine. And then there's been times in the last year we're just in a pinch, traveling, didn't have access to raw dairy. But it's like, I'll have some store-bought dairy. Won't kill you one time. That stuff, if you leave it out like room temperature, sometimes just for a matter of hours, it smells rancid. And it's funny because pasteurization is like, the idea is to extend shelf life, which is the case if it's refrigerated. But if you compare raw dairy to pasteurized dairy in like room temperature, I've always noticed that pasteurized dairy just smells rancid and truly does go bad and putrefies so much faster than like raw dairy. It's probably not the greatest practice maybe, but you can get away with leaving it out longer than people think.
Yeah, that's why I brought this up because, I've gone up to 8 days and, it does turn sour. I never got sick. But you're right with the pasteurization with milk, leaving it out for a few hours, it starts to stink. And so I wanted to sort of debunk that raw milk goes bad fast, like within a matter of like a day or two. That's not the case. And so, yeah, I've experimented with some of that myself and never gotten sick.
Yeah,
So,
and if say you do spend all this money on raw milk, like you don't have your own cow, you buy the milk, and it does sour, like it sour to the point where you don't want to drink it. My point of bringing up the baking thing is that it's still very usable. You don't have to throw it out. And I mean, you would know if you have chickens
mhm,
or any pigs, dogs, whatever. It doesn't matter. They don't care how sour it is. They
yeah,
devour it, and I think because they have that natural instinct of, oh, they can smell it. Oh, that's very nutrient dense. Like my body needs this. It's like when like the cows in their mineral feeder, they have separate minerals in separate bins, and they just know what their body needs, and they just
mhm.
pick and choose. Like, oh, they can feel, oh, I'm lacking potassium, whatever it is. They go straight for the potassium. And a little funny story: when I worked at a farm in Maine, very, very, very friendly raw milk state, and the farm I was working at had a market on there attached to the building, attached to the barn. We sold raw milk, and as an employee, the only milk I was drinking for a long time was the milk that was past its sell-by date. That was fine for me. I was like, okay, a little extra bacteria, that's just fine for me. So for years, all I drank was milk, raw milk that was past its sell-by date. Never had any problems. Never tasted funny.
Yeah, that's a cool point. I feed it to our dog and our cats, and they literally fight over it.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I have to do like three separate bowls in different parts of the room because like we have a Jack Russell and then we have two cats and
Oh
they
yeah.
devour. They will drink it probably until they got sick if I kept giving them more.
Yeah.
But it's a special treat for them. I haven't given it to chickens, but I saw on your Instagram that they like it also. So
Well, actually,
yeah.
just this past winter, we hit a stretch. It was like 2 weeks where it felt like there was no sunshine. It was just overcast or rainy. And
Yeah.
chickens need light to lay. They need
Yes.
that. A lot of people put lights on timers from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or something during the winter. But we have 30 odd chickens, and they weren't laying at all. And then our dairy cow calved, and we had some extra milk, and we fed them, I think it was like a half gallon for like 2 or 3 days in a row, and boom, they picked up laying immediately. We were back to a
Wow.
dozen a day, in like just a few days after giving them some raw milk.
Wow. Oh,
That's a
that's
little
cool.
hack for the homesteaders out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's cool, Luke. Native Path has been a podcast sponsor of ours since day one, and it's because our clients feel amazing using their supplements. While a lot of products on the market today contain useless fillers and incorrect dosages, Native Path holds to a higher standard. Native Path's ingredients are sourced from only the highest quality, properly combined nutrients, all while being offered at competitive prices. Use code COMO15, that's COMO 15 at checkout, and receive 15% off each order. Lombardi Chiropractic has been Co-Movement's trusted chiropractor for the last 14 years. They have worked with hundreds of our clients, and I can confidently say they have the most knowledgeable and holistic approach to care that I have ever seen. Whether you suffer from migraines, low energy, nagging pain, or just simply want to improve your overall health, I highly recommend contacting the team at Lombardi Chiropractic. Mention the Co-Movement Gym podcast and receive 50% off your initial consultation and x-rays. Here at Co-Movement, we put a lot of energy into helping you become happy, healthy, and strong. But we're not the only ones needing a good workout. That's why a dog's day out is the best place in Central New York for your pet to spend their day. Your dog will be as happy and healthy as you when you let them run, play, and socialize instead of just sitting on the couch waiting for you to come home. Give your dog the active day out that they deserve. Mention this podcast and get a free day of doggy daycare at a dog's day out. right, let's talk about fitness. Raw milk and deadlifts. We're leaving out the deadlifts part. We're gonna get into that now. So, I like a lot about like what you guys promote on Instagram. A lot of it's funny. We've talked before on our other podcasts, like about like functional strength, right? I do a lot of manual labor, different construction projects. I chainsaw, I drag brush, like I build forts, I hunt, drag deer, all of that. And like, yeah, I think as a fitness industry, and I own a gym, it's what we do full time here. And we sell fitness, we sell functional fitness, which is what I'll get to in a second. But like, where do you guys think that the average gym, so let's think Planet Fitness, Globo Gym, average Joe, personal trainer, where do you think they make mistakes in today's industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. First and foremost, just it's funny, very much mirrors what like the food industry does, which is we want to break down and compartmentalize and isolate everything, right? So there's a machine for like every specific move any joint can do. And not to say those don't have uses, or depending on people's goals, maybe they can be used, certainly, but very rarely are people training how to move their body as a unit, right? Which is what's so awesome about certain compound lifts, like a deadlift as example, is you're training your body to move as one whole functional unit, which is what it's designed to do. And I think that's why you see so many injuries, is because a lot of people, even very fit people, are training extremely linear. So everything has to be perfectly straight, up and down, and they're isolating everything. So technically, their whole body maybe has gotten a workout, but if they have to bend down and pick something up in just kind of a funky enough way, they might throw their back out. And a good testament to this is if you look at situations where the body is really forced to function, I guess we'll say, right? So more than just going and getting a workout in, look at things you are faced with, say in a manual labor situation on a farm or doing these construction projects, and then tell me that, you're supposed to go through life linear and perfect. It's not going to happen. Or you see it in sports too. Take a screenshot of any elite athlete, doing something like a tennis player lunging for a shot, or a football player. Those are not like oftentimes, rarely actually, are they like picture perfect form, never put the knees over your toes, right? All that type of stuff. And so I think the fitness industry, like the food industry, wants to isolate everything, separate everything, instead of bringing everything back and operating as a whole.
Yeah, it's kind of preaching to the choir to you, Josh. You're a functional fitness trainer, but
Mr. Eagle Portal over there.
You're right.
Yeah.
Like, how many people have you seen? Like, they'll do, they go to the gym every day, and they have like bicep and back day, or chest and try. They kind of, like Tommy said, isolate these different parts, and they could probably even do a lot of weight doing those certain things. But then you ask them to do something like a pull up. I can't do a pull up. It's like that's one of the most, or God forbid, like a rope climb. Hang a rope from a tree, climb up it, just kind of, or even just holding something heavy and carrying it. Tommy and I, the dairy cow that calved, she's I think like 2 weeks old, and she got out yesterday and was running all over the farm, and I had Tommy help me, and the only way I could get her back was I had to grab her. I tackled her, picked her up, like a log carrier or something. I had to walk uphill with her to get her back where she had to go. And my lungs are burning because you don't even have to go for a run or a jog to do. You can strength and conditioning that right there. Pick something up, pick something up heavy and walk with it. You'll get a full body exercise, and that's it's a funny example of a functional movement where you're using your whole body at once. I wasn't like curling the calf and then like setting it down, taking a few steps, pick it up, curling. There's no like the rest period or anything like that. But yeah, it's just using the whole body the way it's kind of meant to be designed. Pull up, push up, carrying something.
Yeah, there's like, well, you guys nailed that. Yeah, there's like real world strength, and then what I joke, like there's gym strength.
Yeah.
Gym strength is like you've got your gloves on, the temperature is just right, your form is just right, the right song is
Oh
on,
yeah.
right? Like, and then you can do the perfect lift in the perfect environment. But then when I shoot a deer with my muzzle loader and it runs 200 yards down a ravine with 4 inches of snow, and I'm all by myself with a headlamp on, and I have no choice but to gut it and drag it. At the top of that 200-yard drag, you realize if you have fitness level or not. And your heart rate's 160, your grip is shot, and you've had to keep rotating grip. Like you guys have been there and done that. The same thing with carrying that calf. I've done that many times growing up, worked on a farm, few of them. And yeah, you just got to yoke that sucker right up. It's squirming. Things are weird. You got work boots on. You're slipping in cow shit. And it's just fucking hard. But like, that's the level of strength that I think people going to gyms should aspire to. Can you do farmers carries? Can you do rope climbs or modified versions of rope climbs? Can you put heavy weight overhead? Can you bend and twist? Like, that's where the shit's at. You guys described it perfectly. Like day to day, we're not doing things perfectly with knees over toes, knees out, back flat. And so while machines and isolated patterns have a place for rehab, especially, or extreme beginners, it's not, shouldn't be the core way of training. So that's cool. I knew you guys would rip that pretty good.
Yeah. And you know, like say doing curls or tricep push downs or whatever. If you want to do that because it's fun, like go ahead. Like we're not anti that. Tommy and I will do that at the gym, very often.
It's very fun to get just that stupid pump. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's just a fun way to, go out and move your body. Sure, go ahead. But, just also train yourself to be able to handle, like when Tommy and I castrated like 8 or 9 week old pigs and we're wrestling those things. You got them by the legs and they're jackhammering. You're getting an arm workout.
That's a crazy thing because then there's and I don't know how you would replicate that in a gym, but there's like certain moves too where like holding an animal down while you're working on it.
Yeah.
You're not really doing anything, but you are so tired at the end of it. Because, like, you're just so tight. I think you're just, like, essentially every muscle is flexed, and you have to just stay there for minutes on end. You're like, I didn't really move, but I am absolutely dead from head to toe.
Dude, so here's a great example of exactly what you're saying, like wrestling an animal. I did jujitsu for a period of time. And dude, there's nothing harder than a 5-minute round with another human that wants to strangle you. And right. And you could just be a matter of like, try to hold this person down, not even submit them, but just hold them down for 5 minutes. I'm going to wager 30 seconds to a minute for a beginner. And I've seen this for many, many years. They're just totally gassed, totally spent. Right.
Yeah.
And so like the strength, I want to really hit this home. The strength that we're describing, as opposed to just pure perfect gym strength, the size of your muscles, right, biceps and chest and pecs, abs, does not necessarily at all coordinate to real world functional strength. Okay. It can correlate. You could be ripped and jacked and have a shit ton of functional strength, but you can also have massive guns, the perfect abs, and the big pecs, and be weak as shit. And so, body type does not correlate to functional strength.
Yeah, actually, Josh, do you know who Larry Wheels is? He's very popular on social media. He's just he's a crazy strong bodybuilder. So he's got the big giant pecs, big giant legs, and squats, like 700, 800 pounds, something crazy. Really, really, really strong guy. But there's a video going around not long ago where it's him and some other bodybuilder. And they're doing, it was like lat pull downs and then a row machine. And it was those two guys. And they had a rock climber with them. This guy's 165-pound rock climber. And you look at him and go, okay, that guy's, definitely fit. But he doesn't look like this bodybuilder. He's doing the same weight as these guys with even better form. And he was like, no, this is the first time I've ever done this. And these
Yes.
guys are, blown away. And this bodybuilder, he was humble enough to post that and say, hey, look, every bodybuilder should see this. Like, this guy is
Yes.
pure functional strength. I'm adding a bunch of muscle, but this guy, 165 pounds, full stack on the lat pull down, perfect
Yes.
form.
Was this rock climber Magnus?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we love rock climbing here at our gym. One of our full-time trainers, Andy, is a high-level rock climber.
Okay.
And he does like freaky, crazy strength things. It's pretty cool to see. And so Magnus, we follow his YouTube channel.
Okay.
Super strong dude. I saw that episode that you're talking about. It was mind-blowing.
Crazy. Yeah. I
Yeah.
had a buddy, I was working with him on the farm I was at in Maine. And he loved rock climbing. That was like one of his passions. And we'd go to the gym sometimes, and I'd be like trying to bench or squat or something. And he would do stuff like he'd like stand on a medicine ball and like reach down, touch his toe. I was like, okay, odd, but whatever. And then we get back to the farmhouse, and the door frame on the door.
Yeah.
He was able, not much more than one knuckle, and he's banging out pull-ups on this door frame.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just crazy grip strength. When we're like putting PVC pipe in or something, he's just, no problem. Like, oh man, this guy, he is on to something. Other buddy, Matthew, he just crazy, big, strong hands, big old forearms. Yeah, we go to the gym and he's like bouncing on a medicine ball. I'm like, what is this guy doing?
Yeah, no, those are good points, dude. It's funny you mentioned the door frame. We have our door frame about 8 feet from where I am here. We have a hang board over the door frame, and it has different finger pockets and whatnot. And Andy just walked up to it the other day and like grabbed the jug, which is hard to hold on to. It's not a pull-up bar, and he just rips a one-arm chin up, like no assistance, not warm. He just rips it. And I don't know, for people that have even remotely tried something from a one-arm pulling standpoint, the level of strength for that is ridiculous. And so, no, that's cool. That's good. We could do a whole podcast just on that, but let's move on. Let's talk about the lovely food pyramid. I know that you guys are a huge fan of that. So I just want to read some stuff here to kick this topic off. So all three of us know the quote, control the food and control the people, right? So the food pyramid that we grew up on, I'm a little bit older than you guys, but it's still pretty much the same, said to eat 6 to 11 servings of bread, cereal, and pasta per day, 2 to 4 servings of fruit, use sparingly fats and oils, and then low to moderate level servings, 2 to 3 servings of protein from meat, beans, or nuts. And this has led to a nation, 74% of people are overweight or obese. It's up to 74% now. And it's a nation that's addicted to pharmaceutical drugs, with 20% of people taking 5 or more drugs and 70% taking at least one. The new food pyramid, which isn't so much a food pyramid, now it's recommendations. I looked at it yesterday. It's very similar. Hasn't changed much at all. And so how did we get this so wrong for so long in a world that has groundbreaking science and data collection?
You might blame the science and the data collection. Like the people who made that food pyramid, they're not doing themselves any favors in the argument with the tinfoil hat. When you look at that, you just look at it, you're like, man, this is like a recipe designed for sickness. I remember it wasn't until my senior year of high school where I stopped eating the school lunch, started packing my own stuff. And that's senior year of high school is when I learned about the gut biome, I'm looking at the food on our plate, and I'm like, this looks like 10 people sat around and said, how can we destroy these kids' gut biomes? With the pasteurized, sugary chocolate milk, the who knows what breads and meats, they use. And then I don't even know at the time I knew about the soy, but it's all soy. So how did we get it wrong for so long? It's just go back to what we talked about earlier with, these food processing, businessmen making health decisions, quote unquote health decisions It's like, was it a business move or was it a health move? It seems pretty obvious that it was a business move when you've got the head of the Department of Agriculture. Um, I don't remember his real name. His nickname is Mr. Monsanto because he went from years and years as a vice president for Monsanto to going straight into the head of the Department of Agriculture. And, so I'm sure Monsanto makes a pretty penny off of those school lunches.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if you just look at the correlation of, okay, what was the diet, the standard diet people were eating, and really the diet that was like recommended and viewed as healthy compared to, like, if you went on a timeline compared to, okay, how big and common was the pharmaceutical industry? The bigger the pharmaceutical industry gets, the more you're going to see these types of things pushed, because I mean it's just so clear that the greatest business model you could think of, right? If we can
Yeah.
get these
Yeah.
people sick enough, and that's where, yeah, I think the tinfoil hat has to come on, because like you said, there is no way to explain it. It is so obvious. We, with more of these recommendations and more that the American diet has been following these trends, we are so much unhealthier than ever. We are so much unhealthier than when the average American chain smoked cigarettes and cooked
Yep.
their eggs and bacon in lard for
Yep.
breakfast. I mean, no comparison. You don't even need to look at the statistics, which obviously they're crystal clear. But if you were to look at a snapshot of the population, you can tell,
Yep.
oh, this generation is way sicker, way more unhealthy. And you kind of see it a little bit still with Europe even today. I think Europe gets too much credit, but they do, like, are still better off in some ways, to where I was in Italy in 2019, and it did kind of feel like what you heard about people saying in the 60s, like, or 50s in like America, where, yeah, they're definitely not doing everything perfect, and you look around, and I mean, everyone still kind of chain smokes over there and stuff. There's like very few fat people,
Yes.
and I mean, even then, Italy specifically, they're eating a lot of grains and things like that as a staple of their diet. But there's a bakery on every street corner, so it is very different than just the white bread that you're buying at the store. And it's a sliding scale of health, but there's definitely something to be said for that we're fueling a business model, and we are the product at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's very, very well said. Very well said. I couldn't agree more. When you look at the days when a lot of people were farmers, is more, let's just say, traditional lifestyle, they didn't have gyms. So,
Right.
like, as a culture now, we're working out more than ever, but we're sicker than ever. So that even compounds farther that, yes, exercise, you need to exercise to be healthy at some level, but just how bad the food is. We're exercising more than ever, but we're sicker than ever. And when we didn't exercise hardly at all, other than gardening and, day-to-day stuff, our disease rates were 1/10 of what they are now. So, yeah, we're fueling the pharmaceutical industry for sure. I don't think we need to cover that up anymore. This new chart online with the food pyramid recommendations, it says, I want to look this up for you guys, the dairy recommendation.
Oh, no.
It says move to low fat or fat-free dairy milk or yogurt, or lactose-free dairy or fortified soy versions. So that couldn't be farther opposite from this entire conversation. And that's what the new food pyramid, and it's called My Plate. I think it's called My Plate.
Oh yeah, My Plate.
Yeah, right. It's still the food pyramid, but yeah, so that's still what they're pushing.
Yeah, and when someone comes at it from the perspective of, I've heard the argument before, like, yeah, maybe it's not the healthiest for humans, but it's the healthiest for the planet. But when they're arguing that it is what is healthiest for the humans, that you're like, you're just lost at that point.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, these milk alternatives are not healthy for the planet. So if you think you're making the planet greener with that, that's a joke. The statistic you gave with the almonds was very similar to what I was told. I think it's 10 gallons of water to make one almond from start to finish. And so if there's a listener, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's something similar to that. It's absolutely absurd. So yeah, the milk alternatives are not making the the planet better. You guys have on Instagram, it's how to be miserable starter pack. So I wanted just to read this off. I just thought this was funny. We don't necessarily have to talk about it too much, but it's funny. So number 1, make your life all about yourself. That was good. Live on cheap food, have tons of screen time, sleep in late, spend most of your time in artificial light, don't exercise or do manual labor, and have no relationship with God. I agree with all of those. I laughed out loud.
and we'll add and don't watch any Westerns. We'll add that in there too.
That would make me really cool. Maybe
Yeah,
we should add drink lots of fortified soy.
Yeah, and watch CNN every day.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So let's finish up this conversation. Tell me about your company, Raw Milk and Deadlifts. How did it start? You can give me the brief version, but like, how did it start, and what do you guys currently do?
Yeah, so how it started was, yeah, and Luke and I have touched on this a little. We grew up standard American diet for the most part, right? And didn't grow up farming, didn't grow up with an interest in farming or anything like that. Really, I guess it all started back in high school when we got into fitness and the gym. The motivation back then was to get some muscles to attract the opposite sex, you know. And so that was kind of what we got into, was lifting, standard. But that was enough of a rabbit hole to where little by little, okay, we started lifting. Well, now diet became part of the equation because, we wanted to bulk up. So it started with just calories, right? Getting enough calories in. Then kind of started hearing a lot and learning a lot about like GMOs. So we kind of went to the non-GMO thing, and then watched, like documentaries like Food Inc. And now, okay, still pretty much all store-bought, but organic, right? And as long as it's organic, it must be healthy. And just kind of kept going down that line to where after high school, each in different ways, we kind of found like farming and homesteading and realized, okay, the cleanest, healthiest way you could eat really is to grow it yourself or to know exactly where it comes from. So that was our introduction into farming, still into working out that whole time. And after high school, I was working on a farm in Virginia, and Luke was working on a farm in Maine. And we had both been dairy free for a few years at this point. And we're convinced that we were doing like the healthy thing. But we started hearing about raw milk and how it was so different and how it was like this secret superfood, but was also hard to get or illegal in some places. So it spiked our curiosity. And we each managed to get our hands on it and try it out. Had no negative side effects that we'd experienced with pasteurized dairy. And we noticed when we started consuming a lot of it too, our lifts were going up and we were getting stronger. And we're like, man, this is just like such a crazy thing, and kind of sharing that with each other. And just in passing, one of us made a joke that we should make shirts that say Raw Milk and Deadlifts on them. And really, that was kind of a little bit of a play. There was kind of a theme in the fitness industry at the time with merchandise. There was, I think, like Bacon and Barbells was a company. And there's Donuts and Deadlifts. And I think there's like coffee and kettlebells. We were just kind of like, oh, those are nothing compared, like Raw Milk and Deadlifts. That would be funny. And we kind of sat on it for, a year and just did our thing. But then someone was like, you guys should make an Instagram, kind of documenting farm life and stuff. So we did. And we came up with the hats. Originally just made the hats for ourselves because we thought they were funny, the Make Milk Raw Again hats. And so that kind of started the merch, which is a bit what we're known for now. And yeah, really what we're up to these days, in addition, we're still selling the merch a lot, but really want to educate and kind of advocate for all the stuff we've talked about today, real foods and what that actually looks like, and real fitness, and use it as a platform for our faith, and speak and educate and have some fun while doing it. So that's kind of the brand where it stands right now.
Where do you guys see in 10 years from now? Like, are you just taking this like year by year and having fun with it and seeing how it evolves? Or do you have this bigger vision? What's the plan?
Yeah, I'd say right now we're taking it kind of year by year. I mean, when we first made the Instagram, we were like, oh man, what if this blew up? What would you do with it? And we're, dream of buying some property with a big old barn on it, turning that into a gym, and having that attached to the barn be a place almost like a farmer's market where people can come buy real farm fresh foods, come work out, get some functional fun fitness in a barn, We'd love to keep on speaking, just keep on, being a raw milk advocates, and who knows where that would end up with, helping sponsor legislation to get raw milk more accessible in all these states. Just kind of seeing where the Lord takes it, really. We'll just kind of each and every day put one foot in front of the other and have fun with it and let him do with it as he pleases.
Yes, I just want to say, I saw you speak at Polyface Farm, and you guys are excellent speakers. I saw probably 15 speakers over the course of 2 days there, and you guys are wicked funny. You're very, very good at this. I hope you still do that. You're inspiring and you're influential. One thing that you mentioned during that particular talk was your interest in faith and the Bible, and correlating the message in the Bible to being stewards of the land and our bodies. I was really, really, really intrigued by that when I got home. My wife and I are Christians. We go to a church and, believe in God and the Bible. And, when you were talking about the correlation that we really do have a job set out in the Bible to steward the land and take care of our bodies, that was like frosting on the cake for me with you guys. So, there could be opportunities and potential with, going down that farther too. So
100%.
I think you guys got a lot of options.
Thank you. So we appreciate that. And one of the things we were kind of talking about with the speaking and what we want to do with this, when a lot of people talk about food industry and food, it's very serious, and they provide lots of, well, this study says this, and this vitamin is good for that. And then, with other people with faith, it kind of, is also very serious, like, well, let's just be, our goofy selves and just have fun with it. Spread a very serious message, but in a very fun loving way, be silly geese,
Yeah. You guys you're definitely good at that. And I hope you do more of it. So, all right, let's wrap this up. Thank you for taking the time to talk today. We're going to definitely stay in touch. I'll have you back on down the road as things evolve even more. So how can people learn more about your company, maybe buy some cool merchandise, and support you guys?
So on Instagram, we're just at Raw Milk and Deadlifts. That's where we're most active. We also have a website, rawmilkanddeadlifts.com, so they can get some cool merch. Either one of those places, they can find us before we're canceled. That is,
Yeah, right.
No, that's great, guys. Well, awesome. We'll push that out. We'll put that in the links for everyone that wants to check that out. And thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting our sponsors, Native Path Supplements, Lombardi Chiropractic, and A Dog's Day Out Doggy Daycare. They help us bring you 2 new episodes each month and have a special discount just for our listeners. See the show notes for more details. Thank you, and see you next time on the Co-Movement Gym Podcast.